10. Moonville, Ohio, the tunnel where time forgot. Way out in the woods of southeastern Ohio, tucked between tangled trails and stone-cold silence, lies what's left of a place called Moonville. Not so much a town anymore, more like a memory caught in the trees. No roads go there, no cell towers cover it, and yet, every year, people hike through the forest just to stand in front of one thing: a tunnel. This tunnel used to belong to the Marietta and Cincinnati Railroad line. Back in the 1800s, Moonville was a tiny mining outpost, but by 1947, it was gone. Houses gone, people gone, life gone. All that's left is the tunnel, a crumbling cemetery, and enough ghost stories to make your spine feel cold even in July. Locals whisper about the Lantern Man, a railroad worker who supposedly lost his head, literally, on the tracks. Ever since, people claim to see a light flicker inside the tunnel, swinging like someone still searching in the dark. There are no streetlights, no ambient city noise, just shadows, whispers, and the echo of footsteps that might not be yours. Paranormal groups love it. Hikers report cold spots, a sense of being watched, and hearing train whistles where there are no trains. There's no Wi-Fi, no cell service, and definitely no help if something decides to say hello. This place isn't creepy because of what's there. It's creepy because of what's missing. And if you go looking for answers, just hope the tunnel doesn't answer back. 9. Appalachia, Oklahoma, poisoned promises. Once booming, now doomed. That's Appalachia, Oklahoma, a town that went from patriotic mining powerhouse to something out of a post-apocalyptic warning sign. Between 1927 and 1967, Appalachia produced more than half of the lead used in World War II ammunition. Sounds impressive, right? Until the bill came due. Beneath the town, a Swiss cheese mess of tunnels. Above ground, massive mounds of toxic mining waste called chat piles. Basically giant dirt dunes laced with lead, zinc, and arsenic. Kids playing in poison. Air thick with dust. The water? Don't even ask. It got so bad the EPA named Appalachia the most toxic town in America. Over a third of children tested had elevated blood lead levels. Then came the sinkholes. Streets and houses literally collapsed into the earth. The ground wasn't stable, the air wasn't safe, and finally the government stepped in with a buyout. Most people left, some didn't. But in 2008, an EF4 tornado ripped through what was left. That was the final nail. Today the town's a ghost. No services, no people, just decay and silence. It doesn't feel abandoned. It feels like it was deleted mid-sentence. Drive through, and Google Maps still tries to reroute you into streets that don't exist anymore. All that remains are warning signs and eerie quiet. In Appalachia, the only thing more toxic than the ground was the promise it started with. 8. Centralia, Pennsylvania, the town that burns forever. Imagine a fire that's been burning for over 60 years and isn't slowing down. That's Centralia, Pennsylvania. In 1962, someone lit a trash fire in an old coal pit, and it accidentally spread to a massive underground coal seam. That fire has never stopped. The ground is literally on fire. Smoke seeps out of cracks in the earth, sidewalks steam, streets buckle, and a once busy coal town became the setting for a slow, smoky, vanishing act. The government tried to put the fire out, couldn't. Then they tried evacuating people. Some left, a few didn't. Their houses still stand, crooked, empty, and surrounded by toxic fog. At its peak, Centralia had over 1,100 residents. Today, fewer than 5. The zip code's been erased, the post office is gone. And yet, the fire still rages underneath. Experts say it could keep burning for another 250 years. There's something surreal about Centralia. It's not haunted in the traditional sense. It's something deeper, like the earth itself is trying to get rid of the place. You don't hear footsteps or whispers. You hear your own breath in the fog and wonder if the ground will hold for another step. 7. Dudleytown, Connecticut, the Valley of Whispers. Not on the GPS, not in your travel brochures, and definitely not on the list of towns you want to get lost near. Dudleytown, Connecticut isn't just abandoned, it's erased. No official records, no zip code, no buildings. Just trees and silence so deep it feels like the forest is holding its breath. Legend says it was founded by the Dudley family, who brought a curse across the Atlantic from England. Whether that's true or not, something definitely went wrong here. Residents reportedly descended into madness, suicides, disappearances, and stories of people hearing voices in the woods. By the 1900s, the entire town had vanished. Not demolished, just overgrown, forgotten, sealed. Today it sits on private property, inside something called Dark Entry Forest. 6. Whittier, Alaska, the concrete hive. Now for something claustrophobic. Welcome to Whittier, Alaska, where nearly the entire population lives inside one building. Not a complex, a literal single 14-story Cold War-era structure called Begich Towers. Need groceries, school, a church, your mail. It's all in the same building, and if that's not wild enough, there's only one tunnel in and out of town. That tunnel shuts at night. Miss the cutoff. You're not going anywhere. The place feels more like a bunker than a town. Winter temperatures dip below -15 degrees Fahrenheit. Snowfall totals 250 inches a year. But for the roughly 275 residents, it's home. Cozy, efficient, and just a little unnerving. There's something eerie about living in a place where your mayor, your teacher, and your barista are all under the same roof. 5. Fallsville, Ohio, the town that ghosted itself. Some towns die trying. Fallsville, Ohio didn't even bother. Founded in the early 1800s with dreams of industry, it never got the railroad, never got the investors, and never really got off the ground. By the 1890s, it was already fading. Today, it's mostly forgotten. A patch of woods near a dry creek, some mossy stone foundations, and enough weird energy to make your hair stand on end. The trail maps, confusing. The GPS, spotty. And the atmosphere, unsettling. Locals from nearby towns say they avoid Fallsville Wildlife Area after dark. Not because of crime, but because the place just feels wrong, like it's holding a secret. Visitors report seeing cellar doors hidden under vines, hearing whispers, and feeling eyes on them in the trees. Fallsville isn't haunted by what happened. It's haunted by what never did. 4. Nome, Alaska, the town where people vanish. Nome isn't haunted. Nome is missing people, dozens. Since the 1960s, more than 24 unsolved missing person cases have originated from this isolated Alaskan town. The FBI investigated. Theories popped up. Everything from hypothermia and alcohol to aliens and serial killers. What makes it worse? Nome is truly off-grid. No highways connect it to the rest of Alaska. You fly in or you snowmobile. That's it. So when someone disappears out there, finding them is like chasing shadows in a snowstorm. Surrounded by tundra and brutal cold, Nome is the kind of place where going out alone can be dangerous, even during the day. 3. Cairo, Illinois, the city that erased itself. Cairo, Illinois had everything. A riverfront location, a booming economy, mansions, commerce, culture. They called it Little Chicago. Today, it's a shell. Decay wrapped in silence. The downfall came slowly and painfully. Racial tension in the 1960s, corruption, economic collapse, and leadership that didn't lead. Businesses left, people followed, and what remains feels like a city waiting for a second chance that never came. Victorian homes sit crumbling behind boarded-up windows. Entire neighborhoods are vacant. The local grocery store, gone. Movie theater, long shut down. The air feels heavy, like the town remembers. Cairo didn't fall because of ghosts or fire or sinkholes. It fell because of choices, and the result is a haunting reminder of what happens when a place gives up on itself. The streets are cracked, faded with old crosswalks that lead nowhere. Churches still stand, their bells long silent, their doors locked by rust. Some storefronts still have signs in the windows, faded flyers for sales that never happened. 2. Helltown, Ohio, the evacuation no one can explain. The name alone sets the mood. Helltown, Ohio. Once part of Boston Township, this place was quietly evacuated by the government in the 1970s, supposedly to expand a national park. But then, the buildings just sat there. Barricaded roads, no trespassing signs, whispers of chemical spills, cult activity, and experiments gone wrong. Whether it was cover-up or coincidence, Helltown became a magnet for urban legends. The most infamous, The school bus of death, parked and rotting, rumored to be the scene of something sinister. The church, windows boarded up, said to house symbols that shouldn't be there. Most of the structures were demolished in the early 2000s. But the energy? Still strange. Visitors report being followed, hearing hissing sounds and catching glimpses of movement in the fog. This isn't just an abandoned town, it's one that feels like it never wanted to be found again. 1. Monowai, Nebraska, the town with one soul. Population 1. That's not a slogan, that's the census. Monowai, Nebraska is home to exactly one person, Elsie Eiler. She's the mayor, librarian, bartender, and sole taxpayer. There's no crime here, no secrets, just silence. It's not spooky in the traditional sense, but the eerie quiet. That's a different kind of unsettling. One bar, one library, one woman running an entire town. She's the past, present, and future of Monowai. And somehow, that makes it feel less like a ghost town and more like a living monument to what once was. You can visit, you can have a drink. But when you leave, the town shrinks back to one heartbeat. One soul keeping the lights on in a place that time left behind. The welcome sign is hand-painted. The roads are mostly gravel. And the bar? It's lined with photos of people who used to live there. People Elsie still remembers by name. She prints the library catalogue herself. She signs every official document as mayor, then stamps it as clerk. The town budget? About $500, used mostly to keep the streetlights on. Every morning, she unlocks the bar and brews the coffee. Every night, she closes up and walks home, just across the street. She hosts travelers, chats with regulars, and keeps the spirit of Monowai alive in a way no one else could. The guest book has signatures from all over the world. She's been featured on the news, in documentaries, even in textbooks. But fame doesn't change the fact that when the door shuts behind the Mount Airy, North Carolina, the real-life Mayberry. Step into Mount Airy, and it's like walking straight into an old black-and-white sitcom, except it's real life. This isn't a town playing dress-up for tourists. It is the 1960s, sealed and preserved like someone laminated the entire zip code. This is the birthplace of Andy Griffith, and it wears that legacy with a big, genuine smile. Floyd's barbershop still trims hair like Kennedy's in Office. Snappy Lunch serves up pork chop sandwiches with a side of nostalgia. And Mayberry squad cars casually cruise the streets. And no, not replicas. Actual vintage patrol cars casually blending in with the scenery. It's not retro branding, it's just never changed. The town sits at under 10,000 residents, yet it brings in over 300,000 tourists every year who are just aching for a taste of simpler times. No flashy reinventions here. The biggest controversy in recent memory? Whether or not to replace a payphone outside a soda shop. Spoiler alert, they didn't. That rotary phone is staying right where it is. This place isn't a time capsule, it's a working town. There's a functioning post office, bowling alley, and yes, the diner knows everyone's name, including their grandpas. Financially, things are manageable. Median home prices hover around $175,000. Crime is low. Small businesses keep the engine running, but it's slow living. The internet is slow. The pace is slow. Working remotely? Sure, if shouting across the street to Earl at the hardware store counts. Mount Airy feels like a Norman Rockwell painting, one that forgot to install Wi-Fi. It's charming, but you'd better be cool with restaurants closing on Sundays and radio stations that haven't updated their playlists since Elvis wore blue suede shoes. Still, there's a kind of magic to waving at your neighbors from a front porch swing that creaks louder than it swings. Silverton, Colorado, a western dream that froze in time. Silverton sits high, really high, over 9,000 feet in the Colorado mountains, and it feels like the altitude somehow preserved the past along with the air. When the steam train rolls into Main Street, it's not a special event. It's just another day in a town that never bothered to modernize. Main Street looks like it hasn't changed since Eisenhower was president. Brick buildings, American flags, and a total absence of anything resembling a fast food chain. Not even a sad neon open sign. Everything here feels untouched by modern life, like a Hollywood Western got abandoned mid-shoot and the townsfolk just kept living in it. Population, barely 650 people. That's not a community, it's a guest list. The town breathes tourism, but not in a big, shiny resort way. It's more handmade postcards and slow-churned fudge. The job market? Seasonal at best. Locals know the real economic barometer is how much snow the train can cut through in winter. It's beautiful, though. The kind of beautiful that makes cell reception give up halfway through a text. The air smells like pine and old snow. The silence is complete. And the diner? It hasn't changed its menu or booth cushions since the Kennedy administration. Silverton trades convenience for charm. There's one grocery store. Wi-Fi runs on hope. And if you're lucky, you'll catch the scent of wood-burning stoves drifting down from a cabin perched at a 45-degree angle. And there's something cinematic about the way the fog rolls in over the mountains every morning, like nature's version of a soft focus lens. The post office doubles as a place for mail and gossip, often delivered in the same sentence. Locals leave their keys in the ignition, partly out of trust, partly because locking up feels unnecessary when everyone knows your cousin. The local bar doesn't have a happy hour, it just has one bartender who remembers your drink before you sit down. The antique shop still sells postcards that haven't been updated since the Nixon years. You might see a dog napping in the middle of the street, unbothered by the complete lack of traffic. People wave here, even if they don't know you, especially if they don't know you. There's a rotary phone at the general store, and no one thinks it's a joke. Town meetings happen in person, not on Zoom, and they're more social hour than policy. The laundromat has a bulletin board full of handwritten notes, babysitting offers, and church bake sales. Cell phones die quickly, but conversations last hours. You'll hear harmonica music echoing off the canyon walls some nights, and no one knows where it's coming from. It's the kind of place where time doesn't just move slowly, it forgets to move at all. If you're waiting for life to hurry up, Silverton will politely ignore you. It's a snow globe no one bothered to shake. And that's exactly why it works. Havana, Illinois, a river town that never left the parade. On the banks of the Illinois River sits Havana, a town that wears the 1960s like a well-worn denim jacket, faded, sturdy, and way cooler than it gets credit for. Main Street, full-on time travel, neon signs, original brick storefronts, and a theater still playing films on 35mm. Fishing boats at dawn, coffee poured by someone who's known your name since grade school, and parades that haven't updated their floats since your grandma's prom. Underneath all that throwback charm is a surprisingly practical setup. The median home price sits around $110,000. Rent, around $700. Cost of living, about 23% lower than the national average. Crime, below average. It's not glamorous, but it's dependable. The job market hums along on healthcare, education, and agriculture. Life here is slow, and deliberately so. Folks aren't lazy, they're just intentional. If you're used to fast lanes and express deliveries, this town might give you emotional whiplash. Even the weather has personality. The humidity's so thick, it should have its own mailbox. And the mosquitoes, they probably pay property taxes. But that's part of Havana's unfiltered charm. You'll sweat, you'll wave, you'll chat about fish bait like it's national news. Bristol, Rhode Island, America's oldest 4th of July party. Bristol doesn't just remember the past, it paints it across the asphalt, literally. The town's main street has red, white, and blue stripes down the center, and it's not for decoration. It's for the oldest continuous Independence Day parade in the country, since 1785. Brick buildings, real American flags, not the two-day shipping kind, and diners that serve clam chowder with a side of sass. Bristol oozes Rockwell vibes, with a sprinkle of lobster rolls. The town of about 22,000 lives like the Constitution just passed. Crime, half the national average. Home prices, around $465,000, so nostalgia isn't cheap here. Jobs, steady in tourism, education, and a surprising amount of boat repair. Fast food, not happening. Everything's slow on purpose, even trash pickup bows to tradition. If the 4th of July falls on a Sunday, the town reschedules the whole celebration to avoid clashing with church. Bristol doesn't just stick to its traditions, it enforces them with pride. And that pride shows up in the smallest details. Front porches aren't decorative here. They're used. Neighbors actually sit on them, waving like it's part of the town code. The hardware store still smells like wood and metal instead of plastic packaging. Kids ride bikes without helmets and somehow survive, just like they did decades ago. The local bakery opens early and sells out early, and nobody complains because that's just how it's always been. Boat shoes aren't a fashion choice, they're a requirement. The harbor hums quietly with masts clinking in the wind, and sunsets feel scheduled, like everyone knows when to stop and watch. The local newspaper still matters, especially the part about who won the chowder contest. Cell service works fine, but conversations matter more. Newcomers are noticed immediately, not suspiciously, just thoroughly. The pace never speeds up, even when summer crowds roll in. Time bends to tradition here, not the other way around. Bristol doesn't feel frozen, it feels resolved, like it figured something out early and saw no reason to change it. Bisbee, Arizona, the 60s never left, and neither did the weird. Bisbee is like stepping into a thrift shop curated by a poet and a retired biker. This copper mining town collapsed in the 70s and then got rescued by artists, psychics, and people who own more incense than furniture. It's not pretending to be quirky, it just is. Population around 5,000, and every one of them seems to be running a side hustle that involves crystals, candles, or garage concerts. The buildings lean, the roads lean harder, parking is a sport. Every house is built on a slope steep enough to send your groceries rolling into next week. Median home prices sit at about $255,000. Rents around $800. Crime's low unless you count how aggressively the art stares at you. Forget about drive-thrus or delivery apps. Bisbee's heartbeat is its street festivals, vintage shops, and haunted hotels. Don't expect clocks, don't expect urgency, but do expect jazz echoing from a rooftop, a bar in a cave, and probably someone named Zeke selling furniture made from political signs. Saugatuck, Michigan, where lake vibes meet mid-century cool. Picture a beach town designed by Bob Ross and Andy Warhol after a peaceful retirement. That's Saugatuck. Perched on the western edge of Michigan, it's charming, colorful, and deeply allergic to stress. Pastel buildings line the downtown. Cafes with hand-painted menus sit next to antique shops with radios that still play Motown. And then there's the hand-pulled chain ferry that crosses the river. Not a theme park ride, a real working ferry operated with a rope. Population hovers under 1,000 full-timers. Median home prices, around $550,000. Lakefront nostalgia costs money, and parking in summer, you'd have better luck catching a unicorn at Oval Beach. Tourism fuels the economy. Locals trade lavender lattes and good vibes. Even the baristas probably have master's degrees in sculpture. It's not just a town, it's a curated lifestyle. Abilene, Kansas. Built by Ike, stopped with Ike. Abilene is where Dwight D. Eisenhower grew up, and the town never really moved on from it. Drive through, and it's Eisenhower Drive leading to Ike's coffee shop next to the Eisenhower Library. It's like a wholesome Truman Show without the conspiracy. Median home prices, around $160,000. Crime, you'd be more likely to get scolded for not waving than actually mugged. The job market, solid but simple. Agriculture, education, tourism. The cost of living is nearly 30% below the national average. People leave their trucks running outside the post office. The pace is slow and nobody's complaining. There are 5 grocery aisles and one of them probably leads to your cousin's house. It's not frozen in time. It just politely declined to evolve. Woodstock, New York, peace, love, and $550,000 homes. No, the famous 1969 festival didn't actually happen here, but don't tell Woodstock that. This town embraced the 60s so hard it franchised the vibe. The streets are lined with shops named Miracles and the Rainbow Room. There are drum circles, spiritual retreats, and more crystals than sidewalks. If there's a trend that ends in healing, someone's selling it. Population around 6,000. Median home price, $550,000. Enlightenment has a price. It's hippie Disneyland, except with kombucha breweries and full moon goat yoga. The job market is heavy on tourism, art, and Reiki healing. There's a festival every weekend, and the most aggressive crime is probably a sarcastic bumper sticker. Wall, South Dakota, cowboy boots, T-Rex, and 5-cent coffee. Wall Drug is technically a store, but let's be honest, it is the town. The signs start showing up 100 miles out. By mile 50, you're curious. By mile 100, you're obsessed. Step off the highway, and you're inside a living Western theme park. Cowboy mannequins, homemade donuts, taxidermy jackalopes, and a T-Rex for some reason. Population? About 750 people. Median home value? $160,000. Rent's cheap, if you can find a place. Jobs are mostly tourism and retail, with a sprinkle of ranching. It's surreal, and yeah, the coffee's 5 cents. It tastes like hot nostalgia with a splash of dust. Mineral Point, Wisconsin, the Hallmark movie that forgot to end. Mineral Point didn't stumble into being old-fashioned. It chose it. This town prioritized historical preservation before it was trendy. Back in 1965, Main Street matters here. There's original limestone, handmade pottery, and antique stores that feel like they've always been waiting for you. Population around 2,500. Median home prices about $240,000. Unemployment just 2.8%. Crime practically non-existent. Everyone's named Barb, and they probably bake. It's a town where the post office still matters and church picnics have pie auctions. You'll feel welcome and slightly suspicious of how friendly everyone is. Conclusion: these aren't themed towns or movie sets. They're real places, still living like the Beatles just dropped their first single, and kids are drinking root beer floats after school. In a world obsessed with fast everything, these towns offer a strange kind of rebellion, staying the same, choosing slow, choosing charm, choosing to wave from the porch instead of scroll on a screen. Would you trade 5G and Uber Eats for a town where the payphone still works? Or maybe the real question is, why not? If this journey into time warp towns sparked a bit of There's a piece of America that's technically more American than Puerto Rico, but you can't live there, you can't visit it, and the government pretends it doesn't exist. Somewhere in the Pacific, an island has a congressman representing exactly 0 voters. And right now, there are places flying the US flag where you could commit a crime and no one's entirely sure which laws would apply. Welcome to the territories they filed under too weird to explain. Most Americans learn about 50 states in school. What they don't teach you is that the United States controls 14 additional territories scattered across the Pacific and Caribbean, and the legal status of these places makes absolutely no sense. Some have millions of people who can't vote for president. Others are just coral reefs that disappear at high tide, yet somehow have federal protection and their own legal jurisdictions. And here's the kicker. This entire system started because of bird poop. Let's talk about the Guano Islands Act of 1856, because you can't understand America's territorial empire without understanding its obsession with seabird excrement. In the 1840s, guano became the hottest commodity on the planet, a prized agricultural fertilizer and source of saltpeter for gunpowder. By the early 1850s, the UK imported over 200,000 tons per year, and US imports totaled about 760,000 tons. The resulting guano mania drove prices through the roof and triggered what might be the strangest land grab law in American history. Congress passed the Guano Islands Act, which essentially said, if you find an uninhabited island covered in bird droppings, you can claim it for the United States. No joke, this law authorized US citizens to take possession of unclaimed islands containing guano deposits, empowered the president to use military force to protect these claims, and established US criminal jurisdiction over these territories. The result? America claimed over 100 islands worldwide. Most were later abandoned or given back, but about a dozen remain under US control today. And here's what nobody tells you. This act created the entire concept of insular areas, territories that could be held by the federal government without any prospect of ever becoming states. That's right. Before 1856, any territory acquired by the US was considered an integral part of the country with a clear path to statehood. But the Guano Islands Act changed everything, establishing that America could own land indefinitely without granting it the rights, protections, or representation that come with being part of the Union. Think about that next time someone says, America doesn't have colonies. So what exactly are these forgotten territories? Let's start with the minor outlying islands, 8 tiny, mostly uninhabited specks in the Pacific and Caribbean. Baker Island, Howland Island, Jarvis Island, Johnston Atoll, Kingman Reef, Palmyra Atoll, Wake Island in the Pacific, plus Navassa Island in the Caribbean. Most Americans couldn't point to any of these on a map. Hell, most maps don't even bother printing their names. But they're all technically US soil, which means they have airspace rights, maritime boundaries, and in theory, American law applies. Take Navassa Island, sitting between Haiti and Jamaica. The US grabbed it in 1857 under the Guano Act, and Haiti has been disputing that claim ever since. Haiti's constitution has explicitly named Navassa as Haitian territory since 1874. and Haitian fishermen had been using the island for centuries before America even knew it existed. But the US doesn't recognize Haiti's claim, and the island remains under American control despite having a population of exactly 0. It's administered by the US Fish and Wildlife Service, protected as a nature reserve, and completely inaccessible to the public. So here's the situation. Two countries claim sovereignty over a rock that nobody lives on, nobody wants to visit, and that serves no purpose except as a geopolitical middle finger. Then there's Kingman Reef, which might be the most absurd territory in American history. This isn't an island. It's a mostly submerged coral atoll that disappears at high tide. There are exactly 3 acres of land above water, composed entirely of coral rubble and giant clamshells. The highest point is less than 5 feet above sea level and is wetted or awash most of the time, making it a serious maritime hazard. And yet, Kingman Reef is a US territory with federal protection, managed by the Fish and Wildlife Service, and technically subject to American criminal jurisdiction. Here's where it gets wild. You could theoretically commit a crime on Kingman Reef and be prosecuted under US federal law, assuming you could stand on the reef long enough without drowning. The atoll encloses a lagoon up to 270 feet deep and has a total area of 29 square miles within its outer rim. But only those 3 acres are above water. Population 0. Crime rate technically perfect, unless you count the sharks. And speaking of sharks, the ecosystem here is completely inverted. 85% of the fish biomass consists of apex predators. That means sharks, jacks, and other carnivores dominate the food chain in numbers never seen elsewhere. It's an aquatic thunderdome where everything wants to eat everything else, and somehow the US government said, yes, this parking lot-sized death reef is ours. But wait, there's a territory even stranger than the disappearing reef. Swains Island, part of American Samoa, has been privately owned by the Jennings family since 1856. An American whaler named Eli Hutchinson Jennings arrived with his Samoan wife, Malia, allegedly purchased the island for 15 shillings per acre and a bottle of gin from an English captain, and his descendants have controlled it ever since. The US formally annexed Swains Island in 1925, but the Jennings family retained ownership. And here's the beautiful absurdity. Swains Island has a seat in the American Samoan legislature, a representative, a delegate with voting power, for an island with 0 permanent residents since 2008. Let me repeat that. An island with no people has more representation in government than Washington, D.C., which has 700,000 residents. Swains Island gets a legislative voice. Puerto Rico's 3.2 million US citizens don't get a voting member of Congress. Make that make sense. Speaking of legal paradoxes, let's talk about Palmyra Atoll, the only US territory that's both incorporated and unorganized. Incorporated means it's officially part of the United States proper, with full constitutional protections. Unorganized means it has no local government, no legislature, and no permanent residents. Palmyra is technically more American than Puerto Rico from a legal standpoint. If you're born on Palmyra, you're unequivocally a US citizen with full constitutional rights. If you're born in Puerto Rico, you're a citizen, but the Constitution doesn't fully apply, and you can't vote for president. Palmyra was part of the Kingdom of Hawaii, annexed by the US, along with Hawaii in 1898. When Hawaii became a state in 1959, Congress explicitly excluded Palmyra from the new state. Why? The official reason was that it was uninhabited and distant, so it would be difficult to administer. The unofficial reason might have involved property ownership disputes, potential challenges to US sovereignty claims, and the fact that the island's private owners had successfully prevented the Navy from condemning the island during World War II. Today, Palmyra is co-managed by the US Fish and Wildlife Service and the Nature Conservancy, with a rotating population of 4 to 20 researchers and staff. And it has a dark history. In 1974, a wealthy sailing couple named Mac and Muff Graham disappeared while staying on Palmyra. Years later, in 1981, a visitor stumbled upon human remains and a metal box containing bones. Forensic analysis revealed that Muff Graham had been bludgeoned to death, her body dismembered and burned with an acetylene torch before being stuffed into the aluminum container and dumped in a lagoon. Two drifters who had been on the island at the same time, Buck Walker and Jennifer Jenkins, were eventually tried for the murder. Walker was convicted. Jenkins was acquitted with the help of Vincent Bugliosi, the prosecutor who put away Charles Manson. McGraham's body was never found. So yeah, Palmyra is paradise, if your definition of paradise includes unsolved murders and decomposing evidence washing ashore. Then we've got Johnston Atoll, America's toxic wasteland with a wildlife refuge PR campaign. From the 1960s through 2000, Johnston was where the US military stored and incinerated chemical weapons. We're talking nerve agents, sarin, VX, sulfur mustard, plus Agent Orange defoliant from Vietnam. The island also hosted nuclear tests in 1962, at least one of which failed catastrophically and scattered plutonium contamination across the atoll and into the surrounding waters. US troops were sent in for a rapid cleanup, scrubbing down launch pads and carting away debris. The plutonium-contaminated rubbish dumped in the lagoon. By 2000, the Johnston Atoll Chemical Agent Disposal System had successfully destroyed 412,798 chemical weapons, about 6% of the entire US stockpile. The military declared the island decontaminated and handed it over to the Fish and Wildlife Service as a nature reserve. But decontaminated is doing some heavy lifting here. There are still warnings about unexploded munitions. The soil has been tested, the top layers removed, but plutonium has a half-life of 24,000 years, and nobody's in a rush to move there. Population 0, except for a small army of coconut crabs that may or may not glow in the dark. Job market closed unless you're a hermit crab with security clearance. Wake Island is another category of strange, a military outpost frozen in World War II. It's home to about 100 rotating military personnel and contractors, with no permanent residents and no local government. Wake was bombed on the same day as Pearl Harbor, and the Battle of Wake Island became a legendary moment of American resistance during the war. Today, it's mostly a runway, some bunkers, rusting communication towers, and a radar installation that definitely isn't watching satellites. The US Air Force administers it, and new construction is planned for 2027, demolishing old facilities and building consolidated support structures, new living quarters, and an expanded aircraft parking apron. Wake is also disputed by the Marshall Islands, which claims historical sovereignty. But since Wake has no voting rights, no constitutionally guaranteed protections, and no way to challenge its status, it remains in legal limbo. Now let's talk about the territories people actually live in. Puerto Rico is the big one, 3.2 million US citizens living in what can only be described as a constitutional contradiction. Puerto Ricans are citizens, they carry US passports, they can be drafted into the military, and they pay federal payroll taxes. But they can't vote for president, they have no voting representation in Congress, and the Constitution doesn't fully apply to them, thanks to a series of early 1900s Supreme Court cases called the Insular Cases, which were based on explicitly racist rationales about whether uncivilized populations could handle full constitutional rights. Puerto Rico has held 7 referendums on its political status. The most recent one, in November 2024, saw 56% of voters choose statehood. 620,782 votes. That's more support than any candidate for governor received. And Congress? Crickets. No action, no binding vote. Just another non-binding referendum added to the pile. Meanwhile, 59% of Americans support Puerto Rico statehood, but that doesn't seem to move the needle either. Here's the twist. Puerto Rico has become a tax haven for wealthy Americans through Act 60. If you become a bona fide resident of Puerto Rico, you can enjoy a 4% corporate income tax rate, 0% tax on capital gains, and 100% tax exemption on dividends. These incentives are valid until 2035. So if you're rich, Puerto Rico rolls out the red carpet. If you're a local resident, you're stuck with a median income of $22,000 per year, less than half the US mainland average, high electricity costs, unreliable infrastructure, and a government that treats you like a second-class citizen. Then there's the Northern Mariana Islands, population 47,000, which spent decades as a corporate loophole disguised as a US territory. From the mid-1980s through the early 2000s, Saipan became ground zero for labor exploitation. Garment factories imported workers, mostly women from China and the Philippines, paid them below minimum wage, housed them in overcrowded barracks, and worked them 14-hour days. The products, stamped made in USA because the Northern Marianas technically counts as US territory. Companies got to slap patriotic labels on goods produced under sweatshop conditions, bypassing US labor laws entirely. The scandal eventually led to reforms. Federal minimum wage was finally enforced, the factories shut down, and new regulations came in. But the economic damage was done. Today, the islands survive on tourism, mostly from Korea, China, and Japan. But the cost of living remains high due to expensive electricity and imported goods. And here's a fun fact: US citizens can live and work there visa-free. But you can't buy land unless you have Northern Marianas descent. You can only lease. Finally, we have the freely associated states, Micronesia, the Marshall Islands, and Palau. These are technically independent countries, not US territories. But the compacts of free association give the US full control over their defense, foreign policy, and access to their land, water, and airspace for military purposes. In exchange, the US provides financial assistance, and citizens of these nations can freely travel, live, work, and study in the United States without visas. The compacts were renewed in 2023 and run through 2043. Combined population, just over 200,000. Most young people leave for Guam, Hawaii, or the mainland because there are no jobs. Healthcare requires flights. Internet is slow. Electricity is inconsistent. And yet, these countries host US military installations and radar systems that are critical to Pacific defense strategy. More people from these nations now live in the US than in their home countries. America gets the land, the strategic positioning, and the talent. The islands get financial aid and the polite fiction of sovereignty. So here's the reality. The United States controls 14 territories with nearly 4 million residents, most of whom are US citizens. They live under American law, pay federal taxes, serve in the military, and carry US passports. But they can't vote for president. They have no voting representation in Congress. They can be denied federal benefits with minimal justification, and the Constitution doesn't fully protect them. Some of these territories are uninhabited rocks claimed for bird poop. Others are toxic wastelands declared nature reserves. One is a family-owned plantation with a legislative seat and no voters. And one is legally more American than the place where 3 million citizens actually live. These are the territories they pretend don't exist. The legal loopholes, the constitutional gray zones, the places that reveal what the United States really is when you strip away the mythology of equality and representation. You want freedom? You can have it on a reef that I've explored a lot of places across the country. Towering skylines, polished coastlines, the postcard-perfect views everyone posts on Instagram. But nothing prepared me for the quiet beauty of Appalachia. Not the Appalachia you hear about in stories, not the stereotypes on TV, and definitely not the version that gets tossed around in political debates. I'm talking about the real Appalachia, an ancient world of green-tinted mountains, fog that moves like breath, towns where people still wave at strangers, and landscapes so untouched they feel older than memory itself. And today, I'm taking you there. But before we start, I want you to ask yourself something. When was the last time you saw something so beautiful it actually changed the way you felt about the world? Because that's what happened to me in Appalachia, again and again, in places that most people will never take the time to see. It began at sunrise. Appalachia doesn't just wake up, it rises slowly, like a story being told page by page. The morning fog curls between the blue-green ridges, soft and gentle, as if the mountains are still dreaming. I drove along a winding road in the early dawn, no phone signal, just the hum of my engine and the sound of wind lifting through trees. The forests on both sides were dense and endless, oak, birch, and hickory forming a canopy that filtered the sunlight into warm, honey-colored streams. There's something humbling about driving through a place that feels both alive and untouched. It's as if the land is reminding you that no matter how fast the world moves, it still belongs to something older. The first place that stole my breath was a hollow so hidden, so quiet, it felt like a secret. Locals told me about it the night before, saying, "If you really want to see the heart of Appalachia, go where the pavement ends." So that's exactly what I did. I followed a narrow gravel path down into a valley where the world suddenly opened up. Wildflowers covered the fields in bursts of color, soft violets, golds, and whites that swayed gently in the breeze. In the distance, a weathered barn leaned into the sun, its red paint faded by decades of rain and wind. You could almost hear the echoes of generations that lived, worked, and sang in these hills. And the silence. God, the silence. Not empty, not lonely, but peaceful in a way that modern life forgets. It was the kind of silence that wraps around you and lets you breathe deeper. It was here that I realized something people rarely understand. Appalachia isn't just a place, it's a feeling, a slow rhythm, a quieter heartbeat, a reminder that beauty doesn't need to shout to be heard. As I continued deeper into the mountains, I stumbled onto places that don't appear on maps. Streams as clear as glass, waterfalls hidden behind curtains of moss, and cliffs that opened into sweeping, cinematic views without a single human structure in sight. In one spot, the rocks formed natural steps, leading down into a gorge where the light filtered through the trees like stained glass. The water pooled into crystal blue basins that shimmered with every ripple. It looked like something out of a fantasy world, untouched and unclaimed. I sat by the edge, listening to the water whisper over the stone, and I wondered how many people had passed through here before me. Maybe none, maybe countless. That's the magic of Appalachia, you never know. There's history woven into every ridge and valley here. The mountains themselves are ancient, older than the Himalayas, older than the Rockies, older even than the concept of America. When you stand on an overlook and see ridge after ridge fading into the haze, you're not just looking at geography, you're looking at time itself. These mountains have witnessed millions of years, oceans rising, continents shifting, species evolving, and they'll still be here long after we're gone. But Appalachia isn't just about landscapes, it's also about people. People who carry stories and traditions handed down like heirlooms. I met one man near a general store, a small wooden place that smelled like cedar and motor oil, who told me that his family had lived in the same valley for 7 generations. "These mountains raised us," he said with a grin. "They teach you everything you need to know about patience, work, and gratitude." And you could tell he meant it. Appalachians have a warmth that feels genuine, not forced. They don't know you, but they'll offer you directions, a meal, or a story without blinking. There's a kind of grounded hospitality here that feels like stepping back into a world where kindness wasn't rare. Then there are the towns, small, colorful, tucked between ridges like hidden keeps. Some of them look frozen in time, old brick storefronts, wooden porches, diners with neon signs flickering in the afternoon sun. But what? But the deeper you go into Appalachia, the more you realize that the region isn't just defined by its landscapes, it's defined by the quiet stories etched into those landscapes. Every bend in the mountain roads, every abandoned farmhouse, every forgotten coal town has a history people outside this region rarely hear. And some of the most extraordinary stories aren't written in books or carved into signs. They're passed down through generations, whispered on front porches, carried in the crackle of a campfire, or sung in voices shaped by the mountains themselves. Travel a little farther into the heart of the range, and you find towns that outsiders don't even know exist. Places like Bartow, Marlinton, Hinton, Grundy, Hindman, and Whitesburg. On a map, they might look like nothing more than tiny specks tucked between folds of green ridges. But in person, these towns are living museums of Appalachian culture. You'll see hand-painted storefronts, old-fashioned barber poles, churches with white wooden siding, and diners where the coffee is always hot and the accents always warm. And if you listen closely, you'll hear something else. Pride. A kind of pride that isn't loud or showy, but steady and unbreakable, built from generations who survived the hardest winters, the steepest land, and the toughest jobs America had to offer. Because in Appalachia, everything is earned, nothing comes easy, and that's exactly why everything feels so real. Follow the back roads and you'll stumble onto places that look untouched by the modern world. Old swinging bridges stretch across icy rivers. Schoolhouses from the early 1900s sit in fields like frozen moments in time. And deep in the woods, entire ghost towns still stand. Towns where coal companies once built entire communities, homes, schools, even theaters. Now, only the shells remain. Nature has begun to reclaim the bricks, the wood, the memories. But even those ruins carry a kind of beauty. The kind that reminds you that nothing man-made can last forever, but stories always do. Keep going, and you'll find some of the most mysterious spots in all of America. There are trails that lead to ancient petroglyphs carved by Native Americans centuries before the first settlers arrived. There are legends of buried treasure in the hills of Tennessee, of lost mines in Kentucky, of ghost lights floating over valleys in West Virginia. Locals will tell you these stories aren't just myths. They'll say, if you spend long enough in these mountains, you'll see things science can't explain. Some talk about hearing voices while hiking alone. Not frightening, but familiar, like echoes of the past. Others swear they've felt the mountains shift, almost like the land itself is alive. Whether you believe these stories or not, one thing is certain. Appalachia is a place where nature and mystery walk side by side. But not all the secrets here are eerie or mystical. Many are simply hidden in plain sight, like the waterfalls that only locals know how to reach, tucked behind unmarked gravel pull-offs or down steep, winding footpaths. These aren't the big, famous waterfalls you'll see on travel websites. These are the quiet ones, the sacred ones, the ones that feel like you're stepping into a world no one else has touched. You'll find falls that drop into sapphire pools so clear you can see every stone at the bottom. Falls that glow gold in the late afternoon sun. Falls where the only sound is water carving through ancient rock, a sound that has echoed here for thousands of years. And the wildlife? Appalachia has some of the richest biodiversity in America. Elk roam free in places where they vanished for centuries. Black bears wander forest edges. Endless species of birds weave songs through the treetops. In spring, the forest floor explodes with wildflowers, trillium, lady slipper orchids, flame azaleas, turning the mountains into a canvas of color. Then there's the lightning bugs. In early summer, in certain untouched pockets of the Smokies and Alleghenies, they don't just flash, they flicker in perfect unison. People travel from across the world to see this phenomenon, a natural light show that feels almost supernatural. But if you want to understand Appalachia on the deepest level, you need to spend time with the people who call it home. They're the true heart of the region. Storytellers, musicians, farmers, craftsmen, coal miners, fishermen, and families whose lineages run through these ridges like veins of gold. Sit with them on a porch and you'll learn more about these mountains in one afternoon than any book could teach. They'll tell you about the floods that swept through towns in the 70s, the coal booms and busts, the traditions they refused to let die, and the recipes passed down through generations. Food here isn't just something you eat, it's a heritage. Cornbread baked in cast-iron skillets, brown beans slow-cooked with ham hock, ramps gathered from deep forest pockets, fried apples, skillet potatoes, fried chicken the way great-grandmothers made it, and of course, the famous apple butter that simmers for hours until it's thick, dark, and sweet. And the music, that's a world in itself. Appalachian music is raw, real, and powerful. You'll hear it in community halls, roadside festivals, and front porches where fiddles, banjos, and mandolins come together in harmonies that hit you right in the chest. Many say this is the birthplace of American music. Listen closely and you'll hear echoes of Ireland, Scotland, Africa, and indigenous rhythms, all woven together into something uniquely Appalachian. But perhaps the most remarkable thing here is resilience. Appalachia has faced stereotypes, economic struggles, and hardships that outsiders rarely understand. But through everything, the people remain rooted like the mountains themselves. They adapt, reinvent, rebuild, and rise again every time. Drive through on a foggy morning, and you'll see small businesses slowly coming alive, artisans opening their shops, farmers tending their land, and families greeting each other by name. In many places, the community is so close-knit that everyone knows everyone else. And that closeness isn't a limitation. It's a strength. Because in Appalachia, community is everything. Neighbors look out for each other, strangers are treated like family, and the mountains remind you every step of the way that you're never truly alone. So when people call Appalachia unseen, they're not entirely wrong, but not in the way they think. It's unseen not because it's empty, but because it's misunderstood, because its beauty is too vast for quick snapshots, because its stories are too deep for outsiders to grasp in a weekend visit, because you can't truly know these mountains until you walk them slowly, breathe their mist, listen to their silence, and let them reveal themselves in their own time. There are wonders here that no brochure will ever show you, secrets no guidebook will list, and experiences you can't replicate anywhere else in the world. Appalachia doesn't perform, it doesn't rush, it doesn't try to impress. It simply exists, ancient, quiet, resilient, beautiful, and if you're lucky enough to experience it, you'll carry it with you for the rest of your life.